Hey there, happy Tuesday is the day that I'm recording this podcast for today. And I wanted to hop on today to talk about a subject that I've been indulging in for the past few years now, especially a little bit pre-pandemic, but really dived into it during the pandemic, and that's meditation. And I wanted to talk about it because I recently had a conversation with my 13-year-old nephew who lives with me, and we have a really cool relationship where we can talk about spirituality. He's a pretty wise guy for his age, and I remember being his age and having an understanding for things of the other world and topics that were considered pretty deep for my age group. But my nephew reminds me of myself, and he's able to go there, and he's very inquisitive, and he's very curious about these topics. So he and I were just talking about meditation because he would sometimes meditate with me. I've been doing Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditations, and at some point I invited my nephew to do a meditation that was geared towards children. And the meditation was actually pretty cool. I felt like the one for children actually took me to a deeper place than the typical meditations. And maybe because Dr. Joe was so good about breaking it down in such a way that if a child can understand it, then your inner child can understand it. And so my nephew really enjoyed that. And part of what we would do after is just have dialogue about what we experienced during the meditation. And what I want to talk about today is some of what we talked about from my adult self and my 13-year-old nephew's perspective, is what meditation does for us when we actually practice it. So just a little bit of background, like I won't kid you, like I wasn't always open to being someone who meditates. I come from a background of Christian Baptist religious upbringing, not necessarily from my mother. My mother was more of an open, free-spirited spiritualist who had a high regard for religion, but she also was very open to science and the science of the mind and things of that nature. And so my grandmother was my introduction. My grandmother used to keep me in the church with her. I would go to church with her like 3 times a week, choir rehearsal, usher board. She was on the usher board, and Bible study. But my grandmother was my introduction to my spiritual life. I always tell people my grandmother gave me Jesus. She gave me Jesus, which means for me that she gave me a foundation for a spiritual practice. I myself was never caught up in the religion itself as much as when I would go to church, I would just close my eyes and feel this presence of the Spirit within me. And through my upbringing, I learned that presence that I was feeling, I was given the terminology for it because I didn't know what to call it. But in that specific setting, it was the Holy Spirit, right? Or the Spirit of God, or the presence of the Lord. But for me, it was just, I would close my eyes and I would feel my soul. I would feel my spirit, or the Spirit, a spirit. And I would feel myself to know that I'm more than just my body. And I knew that at a very, very young age. I remember being like maybe 4 or 5 years old, going to church with my grandmother while the pastor would be preaching. And I would literally be in a whole nother zone or dimension. Now I have the language more advanced because of my studies, but I would find myself in a whole nother dimension, just communing with my being. So fast forward, I say all that to say that meditation was not something that was super far off for me, but it also wasn't something that I identified with as needing to do until I came across just understanding how it soothed my nervous system. Like whenever I would feel anxious, I would just close my eyes, take deep breaths. I started learning about breathing techniques, which made me dive even deeper into my meditation practices. And then as I learned or gained the knowledge base for what it can do for me in terms of managing stress, then I started turning to it. I started meditating during the pandemic with a group of women from London. And these women practiced African spirituality, and people who would join were from all different types of religious backgrounds. But they found refuge in this circle that pretty much provided a safe space for us to close our eyes, detach from all the stresses of our realities, connect with our spirit, and then also hold space for one another to process whatever comes up and be a safe space for each other. So we called it holding space. So that is an experience that I had over the pandemic. And then during that meditation, I was introduced to Dr. Joe Dispenza and his work. His book, Becoming Supernatural, was recommended by our meditation leader, coach, and she recommended the book. She was selling it, and I didn't really dive into it at first when she first mentioned it. But as I continued to go along my spiritual journey, different things happened. I lost my godmother, who was very close to me. She was like a second mom, and I just went through a lot of trauma from losing relatives during the pandemic back to back, not all COVID related, but just back to back loss of life, death, since 2019 or 2018, really. Some of the most important people in my life passed between 2018 and 2020. And so I didn't realize I was processing a lot of trauma from that and grief, which was really heavy. And so I started going to therapy in addition to my meditation practices. And I started deepening my understanding and also my spiritual research, right? Like finding other teachers on the subjects that I was dealing with. And it just deepened my understanding for my existence. So as I did that, I started realizing how important meditation is. So Dr. Joe, through his teachings, teaches you that like you have been practicing an identity, right? And along with that identity comes all of the emotional and the thought processes that you've practiced and into being, right? And that's who you identify yourself as. But what he shows us is that just because you identify yourself as that and just because you've practiced that doesn't make it permanent, right? Like if things are no longer working for you in the current identity, you can change your identity. You can switch. And what I mean by that is you can change the way you respond to life and the things that happen to you. You can change the stories that you tell. Maybe you're telling your stories from a space of victimhood, and instead you can flip it around and tell it from a space of being a victor, or someone who conquers, or someone who overcomes, or someone who no longer reacts the same way to adversity or unfavorable circumstances. So he teaches it in a way, but then he goes to the science of our genetic makeup and what our bodies are capable of doing when it comes to self-healing and regulation, and even the parts of life that we can't see but we know exist, such as quantum physics and what some religious constructs refer to as chakras. He calls them energy centers because they literally have their own energetic force fields that are capable of working with the energy of your body. And it's just really fascinating. This is not a sales pitch for his book or any of his materials, but I do find myself being a champion for it because having come across the information, I started implementing it and it's changed my life. So 9 minutes into this podcast, you still are wondering, why are we talking about this, right? So I shared all that to say that meditation is a wonderful tool to help you switch identities in a way that makes your life more desirable and your experiences more desirable, the quality of your life more desirable, your overall health, something that is in a state that's more desirable. And it helps you do that because it helps you to separate from the I that you know yourself to be and connect with the I, the observer of who you're being. So Dr. David Hawkins has a book called The Eye of the I. I think that's how the title of it. I haven't read it, but my nephew was given the book to read by his father recently, and or my brother. And I read the title and I was like, oh, like it just reminded me instantly of meditation. Like when I close my eyes, you're taught to try to focus on your breath, focus on different areas of your body, feel the sensation, because we don't realize how disconnected we are from our bodies. We're so in our heads and we're so in our feelings that we are disconnected from our bodies and how our thoughts and emotions are affecting us. And so, one of the things you do when you close your eyes is you try to disconnect from everything that's an external stimulant or distraction to you and the presence of your breath and the presence of the being that's in your body, observing, right? So if you're breathing, you're focused on your breath, you're not in your head thinking about 1,000,001 things. Or you might be, but the goal is to redirect, because your brain is like a little puppy that needs to be trained if it's never been trained, right? The goal is to be the master of your thoughts and not let your thoughts master you. And so in order to do that, there are a number of things that you can do through meditation to help redirect and train your mind to obey the being within instead of just being on autopilot. And the reason that helps is because, again, you are the sum of your habits. And if you are habitually thinking certain thoughts, you are habitually feeling certain emotions, you are the sum of those thoughts and emotions combined. Those thoughts and emotions dictate the way you process information. It dictates the decisions that you make. And so you really want to think about this as not just, oh, those people who meditate are woo-woo, but you really want to think about this in terms of like, oh, I have a program that's been running, and the people who practice meditation are learning how to engage with themselves in a way that they are no longer run by their program, right? It's not to say that the program goes away completely, because it's practiced, right? If you've been practicing it for a long time or your entire lifetime, it's going to take time to practice something different. The same way when you're training a puppy, your puppy's not going to learn the trick overnight. It's going to take time with reinforcement, consistency, and discipline. And this is why consistency, discipline, reinforcement, those things are so important. And people who are successful at whatever they do have discipline in those areas of their lives that they're successful in, right? They're consistently showing up a certain way. They're disciplining themselves to override their emotions and do what needs to be done for the overall goal to be accomplished. And so when you look at people who meditate and they really go deep in their practice, what they're doing is separating from the identity that they've been given through their upbringing and society, and they're connecting with the true being within themselves. Like, I believe we all have a soul that came here to unfold in a unique way. Anybody who's born into this life has a role to play in the greater scheme of things. I feel like we're all the missing puzzle piece to everyone's puzzle. When you meet a new person, even if it's a brief encounter, even if it lasts 10 seconds, even if it's just someone who walks by you and you think a certain thought, or you're inspired to a certain action, that person played a role in your journey. And so we're all just playing a role in one another's journey. And the more you get to know the soul, the being within yourself, the more you can shed the identities of your experiences and show up more and more as your authentic self and use your experiences as wisdom, right? Instead of using it to label yourself as a failure or as someone who has issues with certain things or someone who's ADD or whatever the case may be. All these labels, they only mean what we say they mean. They only have the meaning that we give them and the importance and significance that we treat them with. They're only as important as we make them. They're only as significant as we deem them. And so meditation for me has helped me to separate from the identity and the labels that I've given myself or that people in my life have given me, especially if they don't resonate with this next chapter that I'm embarking on, this next chapter of my journey where I am a lot more awakened to my reality, to know that it's not permanently fixated, like it's not permanent. No matter what I'm dealing with in my reality, it's not permanent. And any challenge that arises is there to help me somehow expand. It's working in my favor, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's a challenge that I don't necessarily want to experience. Somehow, if I train my brain to not look at it as me being victimized by life or people in my life, but instead me becoming more aware of who I am and my role in co-creating my life, and also becoming more empowered to meet whatever the circumstance is with the solutions that are right for me at any given point in time, at any season of my life. And so when I talk to my 13-year-old nephew about meditation, we're talking about, sometimes we're reflecting on our day. So what challenges did you face today, for example? And he might say, I don't know, he might say, oh, this kid was really rude to me, and, I reacted in a certain way and I wasn't proud of how I reacted. Oh, yeah? Like, what weren't you proud of? Well, even though he was mean, I let him take me out of my character when I responded this way, and I'm not really proud of that. Okay, well, how would you do it different? Well, the true me isn't that. Like, I would just ignore him because he's really just somebody who feels insignificant, so he wants to puff himself up. And I didn't have to feed into that. I didn't have to let him take me out of my character. I could have walked away. Okay, well, next time if it comes up, if that's what you would do, then you're dictating who you want to be in this world and not letting the world dictate how you show up. And that's big, right? And so as I'm talking through this process with him, I'm being shown myself in a sense, because now I get to reflect on my day and see how I showed up and how, the way that I actually showed up, how it compares to who I know I truly am. And if it doesn't align, like, how can I do it different next time? Right? And so meditation for me helps me sit in the reflection of, okay, who was I today? How did I feel throughout the day? Was that in alignment with the truth of who I am? When did I fall from grace is what Dr. Joe likes to ask in meditations that he guides. When did I fall from grace? And if I had the opportunity, how would I do it differently? And as you're sitting with that, instead of repressing the emotions, instead of rejecting them, because one of the things we do in the spiritual practice, a lot of people in the manifesting community, I guess we want to call it, people who are seeing life beyond religion and understanding our physical being, the scientific existence, all of these parts working together. One of the things we tend to do is talk about low vibrations, the low vibes. Well, it's all a part of being a human, right? Your emotions are there as a compass. It's not to belittle yourself or look upon it as something bad because you're having an emotional experience that doesn't feel good. It's not that it's bad, it just is. It's letting you know where you are on the spectrum. And so when you sit in reflection and you're there to take in and reflect on who you were being, you're understanding how to process your emotions and how not to label yourself because of them. These are just experiences and things that you're experiencing and flowing through. They're not your identity. So when I'm able to do that, or I talk to my nephew and we're able to do that, we can then separate the I from the I. The I being the first I being the way that I identify myself. I, me, Brittany Starks, the communications director, the master's degree holder, the, single African American female entrepreneur who lives in sunny South Florida. That I could separate that from the one who's observing these things as I'm making decisions. I shouldn't have done that. I would have done that differently. Like, there's the observer, and then there's the identity. And I think someone, I don't remember who said it, but they talked about how human beings are the only species on the planet that has this ability to think consciously and to identify and understand that there's an I behind the I. And so for me, meditation has really helped me deepen my awareness and my connection to the I behind the I, and really take control of my experience in a sense of deciding who I want to be, how I want to show up, transforming the I, the identity of who I've been versus who I know I can be. And meditation has really given me the space to do that, and the space to use my imagination, because that's the other thing that we don't talk about a lot. We talk about visualizing, but let's break it down to just imagination in general. When you separate yourself from the identity that you've known yourself to be, and you just sit with the presence of your soul, you can literally create visions that you've never allowed yourself to have as the old identity, because of how you identified yourself. If you identify yourself as someone who's unworthy of certain things, then you won't even let your imagination go wild with certain things because you don't feel worthy of it, right? So if you shed the identity, then now you have the opportunity to let your imagination go wild with the things that you never entertained. And so you literally can create a new identity by allowing your imagination to see yourself being, doing, and having the things you've never allowed yourself to see, be, do, or have. And that is a very transformative process. And that is what I get from meditation. I do believe that there are many ways to meditate, but the ways that I've been practicing lately have really been working for me. And so, I don't know, people have different types of meditations, Kundalini and this and that. For me, guided meditations have helped me, namely Dr. Joe's, because he uses some of the Kundalini breath work, which breath work has been proven to change your nervous system and transform that, which is a system that pretty much controls your health. But for me, guided meditation helps me get there, especially those that allow me to reflect on who the I behind the I, and then use my imagination to recreate the I. And then as I get up from my meditation, as Dr. Joe talks about, believing that my prayers are answered, meaning believing that the visions that I've seen or I've allowed my imagination to envision are possible, believing that they're possible, but not just possible, but believing that, hey, this is something that has happened in my imagination, therefore can play out in my reality. Because as we know, everything that was ever created by man started in the form of something that was imagined. It was first envisioned, and when you hold the vision, it can become a reality. And so quantum physics actually teaches us that whatever you hold in vision is actually a reality. It's a parallel reality that actually exists. And as you continue to align with that reality, then you're just drawing that experience to you and in your current quantum reality. And listen, this goes deep. You can do your own research. I will touch on the topic of parallel realities at a later date. But for the sake of talking about meditation, just knowing that when you're allowing yourself to envision a new reality or new potential, even if it was something that happened in the past, Neville Goddard talks a lot about revision. I use my meditation sessions as an opportunity to revise things that happened in my reality that weren't favorable. And I just allow myself to imagine how I could have shown up different and how the people in my interactions could have responded to my difference of showing up and how it could have played out a totally different scenario. And then I sit with that, and I sit with the satisfaction of that. And then what I find when I come out of that meditative state is oftentimes the situation, if it was a conflict, will have a resolution. It'll resolve, and it'll resolve in a way that was more favorable. And Neville talks about this from a standpoint of everything is you pictured outwardly. You are putting out certain energy and you're putting out certain assumptions about everything and everyone in your reality, including yourself and including your relationship to everyone and everything in your reality. And those assumptions are just playing out. So if I change my assumptions, I change my imaginal acts about what's possible between me and this person or me and this circumstance, then I literally shift the energy so that I can experience things that are more in alignment with my new assumptions about the circumstances and the people in my reality. And again, I can go over this in other videos, but and you can also do your research. Like I call myself a mentor because I'm not here to how do you say, pretend as if I have a monopoly on information or I know more than what's possible to the average person or to someone listening to this podcast. I don't. I'm inquisitive, I'm insightful, and I have my own ways of interpreting, and maybe things that I say will resonate with you. I have no doubt that there's a wisdom that I came to this earth plane with that does resonate with people and makes them feel seen and heard, and makes them feel like they can have hope. And so I own that. I do own that. But I'm here to also say that I am a reminder of the power that you have within you. Whatever comes out of my mouth, whatever experiences that I share, is because I know that I did not go through what I've gone through in vain. I came here on this planet with that knowing that whatever I've done or whatever I go through or whatever I have an awareness of is not for my vain consumption or to beef up my ego. It's really to share, to help humanity evolve in whatever ways it needs to evolve, whoever the messages resonate with, however I can uplift and play my part. That's what I'm here to do. So you guys can tap into this information. I consume content from lots of creators who shared this information at times where I wasn't feeling such power or like my highest self. And so I would consume information because the way that they told or shared the information from their unique perspective gave me hope. And so that's all I'm doing. I'm paying it forward. And but I'm doing it in my own way. And so I want to encourage you guys to just tap into some of this stuff that I'm talking about, even the stuff I mentioned in passing. Don't just take my word for it. Go look it up. Go, do the work. And I'm just the mentor, aka the person that is here to share from my experiences. And I know that in doing so, it'll activate something in others. And so that's what I wanted to share, get off my chest. I hope I probably going to go back and listen to this and be like, did I touch on all the points I wanted to? But really, it's impromptu. That's how I'm treating this podcast for now. And I do look forward to having dialogue with other people that I have great synergy with to just talk about some of these subjects because, we're in a very unique time in humanity where a lot of activation is happening on this planet in terms of people who came here with an inner knowing that they are healers or are light workers or are earth angels or star seeds or, just otherworldly, but feel as though they are here to contribute to the evolution of humanity. And for most of these people's lives, they felt out of place, but they've held together lives that seem and appear normal, but internally they've gone through things and it felt like, what am I doing here? Like, what is happening? And, I'm here to tell you, I'm that too. I'm on this path right here with you. And if anything that I say resonates, it's because we're here to learn and grow from one another, but also to activate what is our purpose and what is our gifts. What are our gifts to contribute? And this is a form of my activation and sharing. And I look forward to continuing to expand upon that. And I encourage you to do the same. Find what lights you up. Listen to messages and repeat, because your subconscious mind only understands repetition. Repeat the messages that resonate with you, that keep you feeling high vibrational, and that keep you on your path. Because the program has been practiced for so long, you're going to need to activate something new, and it takes repetition. So keep coming back here, because I'll keep sharing, and tap into some of the people whose books and teachings that I've mentioned, and that'll give us more dialogue to share with one another. If you leave me a comment, you shoot me an email, you connect with me on social media or on my YouTube channel, that'll give us more context to have dialogue, because we're all in this together. We are a human race, regardless of all the cross-sectional identity, cultural identities. We are the human race, and we have a responsibility to one another. And, if I could be a reminder of that responsibility by being responsible, here we are. So, yeah. Thanks. That is the conclusion of my message for today. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, BC Starks over and out.